Hello and welcome. In this lecture, we are going to try and understand some of the concepts we have covered while creating our first web app. One of the concepts we are going to go through here is the IntelliSense. We used it in our previous lectures. IntelliSense is kind of like a tool that tries to guess what code you're trying to type and gives you options. So it's quite useful. It helps you autocomplete your code and make the code writing process faster. So let's just give you a quick illustration just in case you can't remember what it is. If, for example, I'm trying to type a string and I type in the word S, you notice that it creates a sub menu here giving me a list of items. So it's trying to guess what I'm trying to type. So if, for example, I wanted to type, if the guess is right and I wanted to type string, rather than typing the whole word string, I just click on it and it puts it in there, and so on. So that's basically the concepts of IntelliSense. It helps you preempt the code you're trying to write, and in the process speeds up the code writing process. Next thing I want to highlight here is the distinction between the Dot Aspx Dot Cs and the Aspx. So notice we got two file names here, almost identical, but the difference is that one of them has got the .cs extension after it. Okay, so I just want to illustrate the similarity or the differences between them. In a way, these two files both represent the same side of the coin. That is, they represent, two sides of a coin. A coin has two sides. So these files basically represents both sides of a coin. So you can usually access these two project files from the Solution Explorer. So this is a Solution Explorer. If I click on this one here that says identity.aspx, if I expand that, you should see the two files. So you've got the identity.aspx.cs, all right, and then you've got the identity.aspx. As you can see from the hierarchy of files ending in .cs denote the C# files. It means that they are C# files, and they can be seen as representing the code behind the identity.aspx form. So if I double click on this identity.aspx, double click on it. So by double clicking on the identity.aspx, you see the design view. However, if you click on the source option here, which is this one here, and if I scroll down to the top, you should see that on the source here, on line 1 here, you can see a reference on the first line of code. Okay, this is a reference on the first line of code. So you can see here the first line says these are some ASP.NET ASPX code. It also tells you that the code behind is on the identity.aspx.cs, which is this code here. All right, so we've got, if I click on this here, we've got the identity, and then we've got the identity.aspx. So it's telling you that this code behind that, the code is behind this. So if I click on that, which is this here, so this is the identity.aspx.cs code behind that it is referring to. So this is the code behind that is responsible for the form. It is what controls the form. So when running on the web server, this piece of code here will be responsible for handling the back-end logic for the form, while the identity.aspx code handles what's delivered to the front end and is immediately viewable to the user or visitor. All right. So eventually, when the files become compiled, these two files will be merged into a single file called identity.aspx. Okay, so at runtime, when the code is compiled, both files are merged. Let's have a quick look at the server controls, so which is the toolbox here. So these are the server controls. We've already used some of them from the standard. We've used some from the standard toolbox here. The data controls, we've got one here called data control, this one here. The data control basically is used to bind to a data source, like a database. If you're trying to connect something or get some data to and from a database, you'll be using the data control, this one here. That's what's used to bind it. Then we've got here we've got the validation controls. The validation controls basically ensures the end users are providing inputs in an acceptable format. We've got the navigation control here. There's one for navigation. So the navigation control basically is for creating menus and site navigation. We should have one for login. Yes, we've got login one here. The login controls basically handles securing a site with a password protection and retrieval. So we're not going to go through all of them. I just wanted to highlight some of the server controls so that you know what they do in case you want to use them. We quickly go over the button click event. So this here on line 12, on line 17 here, we've got an OK button. And notice here, there's this E here is an event, a click event. So basically what happens is, this is the code behind it. So when we click, when the button is clicked, when the users has entered the first name, last name, and you click on the button, it triggers off an event. All right. So it will then, it will then generate a result, an output, which is this one here. Okay. So these two strings here, this first option here will take whatever input the user types into the first dialog box, and the second one here will take the second input the user types in. And then you have the click button, which will take the result of what's been typed in and output it using this string result. So these strings here, this first name and last name can be known as, they are basically variable. A variable is a kind of like a way to store something. So you can look at a variable as a bucket that is big enough to store information of a specific type. In this case, it will be storing text information, which is known as a string. So the way you declare a variable in C#, you first of all have to declare the type. So by string, meaning it's going to be a text followed by the name of the variable. So this is a type, and that's the name of the variable, and the equals to is used to assign a value to that variable. So I've got a simple diagram here just to illustrate and make you understand the difference between the design time and the runtime. So the process by which the design time, which is the human readable code, becomes compiled down to a runtime or machine readable time. The runtime is machine readable, while the design time is the human readable code. The computer cannot read human readable code, so it has to be compiled into a machine readable code. And this basically is the process. So you start off with your code here. This is your code, and then the code is passed on to the compiler. So this is the C# compiler. So the compiler then compiles the code and passes it on to the .NET framework assembly. All right, so that then passes it on to the ASP.NET runtime, which then passes it on to the web server. There's a built-in web server in Visual Studio. That web server then passes that information, the result of that. After it has been compiled, it passes the result onto the web browser, which is then displayed for you to see. So basically, this is what goes on behind the hood while the code is being compiled into a machine readable code. So the human readable code will be compiled into a machine readable format. All right, the code is compiled into a .NET assembly, which typically can be a single file with a .dll file extension. In the case of a web application, that will be then used and referenced whenever we want to serve up the web page. A web server then launches ASP.NET, which in turn calls that DLL assembly into play, requesting a definition of the identity.aspx file, or whatever name you've called your file. All right. The code will then be executed, and the ASP.NET will deliver it to the requesting web server. The web server in turn will pick that up and send it back to the end user via the web browser. So this is the way the process works from when the code is compiled and when the user sees the content on the page. So that is it. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.